I welcome everybody to this session. Thank you for joining me here. Today we're here to talk about purpose, finding purpose. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and lay out the land. I'm going to share with you the agenda, the flow of today. Those of you who have attended some of my previous sessions already kind of have understanding of how these sessions go. But if you're joining me for the very first time, warm welcome. Thank you for joining me here. And I'm going to just share with you how this thing goes. Workshops at 8 p.m. Central Time. Yes, James, every week, Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 on the East Coast. Yes. So the flow of the session goes as follows. So usually I start off with a story. I set the context of the story, but today I have a bonus for you. I'm going to actually start off with a poem, a beautiful poem that sets the context of what we're here to talk about. And then I'll share some tips and tricks, some things about some wisdom nuggets that I have learned over the course of my 20 years being a monk, and some of the things in which that has helped me personally. And then I go into a meditation to bring this theory into practice. And then we'll end this with a Q&A session where you're welcome to ask me anything that you want related to the subject, related to life, just about anything that you think is of interest to everybody else. If you think it's something very personal, go ahead and please reach out to me through this app, through my website, jchodagam. You can find me on the internet. I've got lots of different ways in which you can reach me: social media, Facebook, Instagram, my website, email address, etc., etc. Some of you are also members of my personal WhatsApp group, which is a great way for us to keep in touch, have a discussion over these sessions. I always provide these recordings after the sessions are over, so that's another way for you guys to be getting the links to those things. So with that being said, let me go ahead and start with the poetry that we have for today. So today we're here to talk about purpose, and I read this thing which is very beautiful. It came across my Facebook feed. It's a poem called Cargo by Greg Kimura. You enter life a ship laden with meaning, purpose, and gifts, sent to be delivered to a hungry world. And as much as the world needs your cargo, you need to give it away. Everything depends on this. But the world forgets its needs, and you forget your mission. And the ancestral maps used to guide you have become faded scrawls on the parchment of dead pharaohs. The cargo weighs you heavy the longer it is held, and spoilage becomes a risk. The ship sputters from port to port. At each you ask, is this the way? But the way cannot be found without knowing the cargo, and the cargo cannot be known without recognizing there is a way. And it is simply this: you have gifts. The world needs your gifts. You must deliver them. The world may not know it is starving, but the hungry know, and they will find you when you discover your cargo and start to give it away. Again, this is a poem by Greg Kimura, and it's called Cargo. So folks, I'm going to share with you some of the pillars around living a purposeful life. So there are 4 pillars, and I'm going to try to get into 2 today. I think that's about enough for us to delve into, and then I'm going to share with you the next 2 tomorrow. So first of all, I want to talk about why is it necessary to understand the reason to have a purpose, and how does having a purpose help you to live a more meaningful, fulfilling life. Now, there was a study done in 2014 in which they looked at the different wealthy countries and saw the connection between the wealth of a nation and the percentage growth of suicides. Now, as you might have studied, that some of the Scandinavian nations like Denmark and Sweden and Norway, they have some of the highest levels of happiness in the world, right? Now, United States is also up there, maybe somewhere kind of in the middle of the rung. But when they compared it with countries like Togo, Sierra Leone, some of these really impoverished countries, they noticed that while it's true that happiness is much greater in these Western countries, they found an alarming rise in the rate of suicides amongst the happy nations. So there seems to be something, the lack of correlation between happiness and living a life of fulfillment. So let us try and understand what is it that makes our life more fulfilling if it is not indeed happiness. So perhaps happiness is not directly correlated to living a meaningful life. So if you think about it, as Western nations, the world is going more and more into this idea of individualism, right? This idea of that my presence, my contribution, who am I, what is my identity, what is my signature in this world. And when we are going further and further into this individualistic society, into which we used to live in tribes, we used to live as a village, we used to live as tight-knit communities. If you think about it, of all the species on the planet, the human species is not the fastest, it is not the strongest, it is not the biggest. Then why did we become the predominant species on this planet? It is because of one thing, and the one thing alone, that is, we learn to work as tribes. When we come together as a collective, we are very powerful. You cannot imagine what it would be like to put 80,000 chimpanzees in a stadium and ask them to watch 22 players kicking one ball. There would be complete pandemonium. So we human beings have figured out how to coexist, how to collaborate, how to cooperate with each other. And that has made us one of the greatest force on this world, to our own detriment, right? So we have used that power, misused that power, and which is where, long story short, if we find ourselves in the middle of this pandemic, find ourselves in the middle of this climate crisis, it is because we have taken our power too far. And Pachamama said, okay, kids, time out. I'm going to put you in the doghouse, and you're going to sit there till you learn the lesson of what it means to go back to feeling the sense of connection, identity, that we can all not exist by ourselves, but we need to collaborate and cooperate, and we are together. Our destinies are tied, whether we sink or we swim. It is something that all of our destinies are tied to each other's. So as we are going into more and more these nuclear societies, right? So we get away from our villages, we travel for work, we travel for whatever reason, for security and so on and so forth. We break away from our family unit, whatever the definition of family unit. It could be your identity of your religion, your church, your tribe, your community, your nationality, what have you. As we are getting separate from this, and as we're going more and more into this way of living isolated from what becomes our basis of what has been our basis of identity, we are prone to depression, prone to anxiety. We don't understand how to deal with things because we depended on other people. We would turn to people who had resources, for certain people, older people for certain things, maybe, certain people with specific skill sets in the community for deriving. So we drew upon each other, so thereby we were able to segregate our work. If you think about it, the ancient system of caste in India had a very, very purposeful role in society. So these two sages were tasked with this idea of how do we divide the power in the land, right? So that we can maintain some sort of equilibrium and harmony in the kingdom. So hundreds of years ago, these two rishis, they call it the sages, were sent off to survey and understand what is it that are seats of power in a kingdom. So these two go away and they make a complete analysis, and they come back and tell the king that there are essentially 4 seats of power. Number 1 is wisdom, education, knowledge, right? So knowledge is a seat of power that was then decided that, okay, we'd give it to a certain group of people who have an inclination towards learning, dissemination of knowledge, research, etc. Then there was the second seat of power, which is Bahubal is referred to in Hindi or Sanskrit, which means it is the power, muscle power of the land. Muscle power is the military, right? The force that protects the nation or the country or the kingdom. So they said, okay, now that needs to be put into a separate bucket. The third was the financial power, monetary, right? Fiscal power. And they said, okay, that is meant to be separated from the other two, and it's going to be having a separate category unto itself. And then the fourth was the power of land. Peasants, the people who owns the land, and they grew the crops and they fed the nation. So these were determined as the 4 seats of power. And so the king decided to divide this and said that no single entity, no single person, group, or people should have more than 1 seat of power under their control. So then they say who had the proclivity, inclination, who had a tendency towards any one of these different traits were allowed to pick and choose from them. And so they went ahead and became experts in those trades. But unfortunately, like everything else that has a beautiful beginning, has a beautiful premise, it dwindled into something that became a corrupt system where if I have the wisdom and if my son is completely incapable, he is completely not in a position to forget about learning himself, but able to disseminate this knowledge to another person. But because I want to wield, I want to control that, I keep that and I say that only people within my lineage are allowed to practice this particular trade. Think about that for a second. So imagine if doctors went out and said that only if my children can learn medicine and they'll be the only ones to be able to disseminate medication and talk about these. Now we're having these vaccines distributed and the son or the daughter is completely incapable, never meant to be a doctor. Would you ever go to that person? No, right? So this is where what started off as a beautiful purpose in which there was a division of labor, there was a certain purpose, there was a certain reason why they distributed this so that there would be no skewed. There would not be a unbalance of power. They gave these different things. So now as we look back and ask ourselves from that same point of view and say, what is your inclination? What is your calling? What is that gift, as the poetry said today? What is that gift that you've been given? What is that cargo that you're carrying that is waiting to be distributed? We all want, each one of us, bring certain cargo, some very precious goods. Now, I love the way Oprah Winfrey says it, that it doesn't have to be something extraordinary in terms of, you having to be a scientist or you have to be some sort of a channel for wisdom coming into this world. You could be a janitor. And this is what Oprah says. You could be a janitor, but aim towards becoming the best janitor. Do your work to the fullest of your capacity in the best way possible, such that you leave this world a slightly better place through your gift of your profession, your trade, than when you came into this world. Mahatma Gandhi once explained that a meaningful life involved the purpose of serving others. So if you think about it, there's always a sense of fulfillment that you get when you give your gifts, when you share your gifts. So it is in the context of you sharing your skill, knowledge, your wisdom, your expertise, whatever that case may be. When you share it with others without necessarily expecting something to come back in return from them, that's when you see the spawning of joy. That's when you see the rise of fulfillment. You see that sense of supersensuous pleasure, right? Something that comes, so why is it called supersensuous? Because it's something that only the heart recognizes. The heart swells. Now, when you talk about being in the service of others, it could be being in the service of the people that you're responsible for. Your fulfillment might come from taking care of your children in the best possible way, being the best possible mother, father, uncle, aunt, grandmother, whatever that role that you're playing. You could be a zookeeper, and you can find a sense of fulfillment that comes with knowing or looking at how much better can I do for the animals that I'm responsible for. And they actually did a survey, and they said that some of the most satisfied people were people in the service industry. These are people who were teachers, nurses. These are people who cater psychologists, psychiatrists, chiropractors. When you are in the service of helping other people live better lives, helping them to be slightly better off than they were the previous day, when you're helping them, coaching them, guiding them, giving them spiritual nourishment. And this is one thing I always say, when you're in the social services industry, whether you realize it or not, you are a psychologist. You are a healer. You are a spiritual guide. People just don't come to you for physical medication or a piece of information. You are also looked at as a source of hope, courage, right? Guidance. They come to you for guidance. So automatically you play this role of being a healer. Now, with that comes an interesting flip side, a responsibility, right? And the responsibility is that you need to learn to take care of yourself. There's a saying, you can only pour what's in your cup. So as people come to you to drink from your cup, you have to know how to recharge, refill, top up your cup. Because if you don't, that service that is as noble as it may be, you will be drained, you will be dropping dead at some point, whether it's metaphorically or actually literally, if you do not learn to recharge yourself. So we were talking about individualism a little while ago. So as we have now been enamored with technology, technology has done wonderful things for us. But today, as we see how humanity is being shaped by these gadgets, these gizmos, we choose to spend more time with our devices than with people. And as I've been saying all through the pandemic, today's I think session 65, every trend that was already set in motion, the pandemic has come and only accelerated it. So what has happened? We have now been playing with technology for about, a couple of decades. And the pandemic has accelerated our indulgence, our connection, our engagement with devices versus people. So this pandemic has been a challenge of social isolation. And as that has happened, people across the globe, there is a rise of depression, anxiety, and suicidal tendencies. I mean, you could have a lot. Physically, you could have plenty of resources. But biologically, evolutionarily, we have evolved as a species that is meant to be with each other, meant to interact, meant to collaborate, meant to contribute, meant to learn something, meant to feel something. There's a fantastic TED talk by a doctor at Stanford who talks about this. And he says, as they have these palliative care, so these are these end-of-life cases, they are struggling, they're suffering, they know they're on the brink of departing from this world. But their light in their eyes begins to glow when the doctor comes for the rounds. Because there is this need for the human being to be touched. So when you're in that condition, when you're isolated from all other people, the ones that you love and who you care about, even the touch of the doctor, that's the name of the title of the talk, by the way, the doctor's touch. There's a yearning for that because we have evolved to be a species that have been raised, have been held with each other, right? So we've seen there are cases where when they studied some of the orphanages, sometimes in orphanages, they've looked at it, they've tried to prevent visitors from coming in because, they can bring in these diseases, the different kinds of viruses, etc. And when they noticed that when these little children were not being held by these visitors, the immunity actually reduced and they had a greater propensity towards picking up illnesses and dying early. So there's a huge connection between social connection and our immunity and our sense of well-being. So chronic illnesses, as much as they can compromise the immune system and be a result of premature death, so also a lack of sense of belonging. Now, the sense of belonging could be with the people that you live with, people that you work with, people that you worship with, people that you are even disparate societies, the people who are spread out. Like, for example, in this community here, I call this my tribe, my soul tribe. You're the people that I've been talking to for the last 12 months on a regular basis. We've kind of held each other's hands. We have supported each other through the highs and through the lows. So whatever that sense of identity, whatever that tribe is that you can form, it's important to go ahead and find that for yourself. Because this gives you a greater sense of purpose than just doing something for myself. Conversations is another thing. So there was a research study done where they were asked in the year 2004 how many people had conversations that were really deep in the last 6 months. And on an average, people found that they had about between 3 to 4 deep conversations about 16 years ago. Fast forward to 2015, that number has come down to 0. So I find it very surprising sometimes, and I tend to be a person who loves to have deep conversations. I cannot deal with superficial stuff. And so sometimes I'll find the most, complete stranger sitting down at some place on a park bench or sitting on an airplane, or just, you meet a person and you want to have a conversation. I'm curious to hear their story, and, being the person that I am, understanding about psychology and, what makes a person tick. And I'm always curious to hear about, what brings them joy and, what is their sense of purpose. It's so often that I find that people will tell me, well, that's very deep and I'm not ready to go there. That's very personal. And I understand certain things can actually be very triggering, and certain things that, you don't want to discuss publicly. But this facade of having a pretense of the world outside and then actually blocking, storing, preventing your story from being heard is actually not a very healthy thing. And I'm going to actually talk about this in the next session, where I'm going to talk about the purpose of storytelling. It is very important to be able to give a voice to whatever that you are feeling, particularly traumas that you've experienced. It is very important to put a narrative around, why did this happen? What did I learn? And how do I move on from it? It is so important for us to be able to see that situation, whatever happened, and say, how does that fit into my grand scheme of things, in my trajectory of where I'm going in life? And so having these kind of conversations, and again, I'm not asking you to go publicly and talk in front of a television or talk in front of a camera like I'm doing right now. Maybe it's one-on-one. Maybe it's a small group of people. Maybe these some trusted individuals who will have your back at all times, no matter what you say. But being able to tell your story is a very important aspect of finding this deep connection. So I reiterate the 2 things that are important for helping you to find a sense of meaning in life is connection, even in the midst of the social isolation, and then finding purpose, and how can you use your gifts to contribute for a greater cause, something that is beyond my own immediate needs, something that is something where I measure the reward for what I put in there. So with that said, I'd like to jump into a meditation to bring all of this, what we talked about, into practice. Okay, now before we jump into meditation, I don't know how long you've been sitting, but if you've been sitting on this chair like I have for the last 30, 40, 50 minutes or so, the body needs a little bit of stretching. So I always want to, before we move into the conversation and into the heart space, I want to move into the body space. So I want you all to take a deep stretch. I want you to put your palms out, interlocked fingers, squeeze them out, to raise them above your head, squeeze, 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 squeeze. Look up at your palms, at the back of your hands. Keep the breathing going. Drop your hands. Again, interlock your fingers, palms facing out, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Let them go out as far as possible. Raise your hands, squeeze your hands, look up. Drop. Now, if you can continue to keep your eyes open, or if you choose to close them, the choice is completely yours. I ask that you start by taking in some deep, comfortable breaths as we begin to dive into the heart space. Breathing in through the nostrils, using your diaphragm, filling all the way to the depths of your belly. And as you exhale, breathe out through the mouth. Nice and deep inhale, noticing the rise of your belly, not your chest. You're letting it drop. Completely letting go. Continuing this deep diaphragmatic breathing. And as you're letting go, releasing any tightness in the body, letting go of any tension, and just relaxing. It is said, the one who plants trees, knowing he will never sit in their shade, has at least started to understand the meaning of life. As you're taking in these deep, comfortable breaths, let your attention gradually turn from the world outside into the world within. And observe yourself. Take a look at the world inside. And ask yourself this question: who am I? Ignore all the internal chatter and any emotional waves that may pass through you, and just notice. Just being an observer. And as you begin to become aware, you may notice two things. One is yourself, not as an object, but a being that exists. Simply aware. Nothing more. And as you begin to become aware of your existence as pure awareness, you will notice that everyone in your life comes and goes. Everyone and everything comes and goes, but you remain. Notice how anything that you place after the words I am, like I am a doctor, I am an American, I am bold, are not what you are. They may describe where you are, what you do, but not really what you are. And you may also notice the primary and natural impulse of the being that you are is to create a connection with others. It is to generate thoughts and actions with the purpose of connecting with others. And then you'll notice that that impulse to connect is something that is very fundamental to your existence. It is the impulse of love. And so you may notice that you exist to be what you are, which is a source of love. Now ask yourself, what is the meaning of my life? Does love need to have a meaning? You generate thoughts and actions with the purpose of connecting to others. In rekindling the flame of your own heart, the real meaning and significance of the principle of what you give is what you get comes to life. To give love is to free yourself from wanting love. You do get something back. There is a reward, but not from others. It arrives as an inner reward called freedom from desire, neediness, and dependency. And as a consequence, all of your emotional addictions and anxieties start to disappear. The insecurity arising from the possibility of not getting others' approval, acceptance, or appreciation dissolves to be replaced by the ultimate security, which arises out of the realization that you are love. Then ask yourself, where do you have the opportunities to cultivate more of this feeling of meaning in your daily life? To act in alignment with what brings you meaning is to clean and heal yourself from an old and often subtle craving. And then whatever comes back from the other, be it acceptance or rejection, it is unable to inject you with the feeling of being too high or feeling too low about yourself. To fully understand the meaning of life, you first need to understand the meaning of death. Death has to be one of the most important elements of life, for it is an event that puts the whole meaning of life into perspective. You may be occupied with purposeful activities, with getting tasks accomplished, works completed, and then comes along the phenomenon of death. Whether it's your final death or one of those many deaths through which you go through day by day. And death confronts you with the fact that purpose is not enough. You live by meaning. When you come close to death and all purpose slips out of your hands, when you can no longer manipulate and control things to achieve specific goals, can your life still be meaningful? You tend to equate purpose with meaning. And when purpose is taken away, you stand there without meaning. So there is a challenge. How, when all purpose comes to an end, can there still be meaning in life? Now, this isn't a practice of thinking of one's last hour or of death as a physical phenomenon. It is a seeing of every moment of life against the horizon of death. And a challenge to incorporate that awareness of dying into every moment so as to become more fully alive. So see your life as far ahead into the future as you possibly can, against the horizon of death. Where do you draw your meaning from? Thank you. And just whenever you're ready, I want you to please come back at your own pace into the circle, into our virtual soul tribe. And I want you to share in one word how you feel right now. And as I'm beginning to see these responses coming in, I also want you to please consider putting out any questions, formulate them, go ahead and start sending them, typing those questions, then I can read them out. I also want to acknowledge those of you who have made donations. I thank you very much. It goes a long way. I just want you to know that it supports a whole slew of folks that help me. I have a sound engineer in Bosnia. My video engineer is in Colombia. I have a social media person in Baguio, Philippines. My web designer sits in England. My web developer sits in Amritsar, Punjab. So your donations are going a long way in helping all of these people, especially during these extremely hard times. So thank you very much. So let's see. I feel awake, I feel whole, I feel light, I feel grateful, content, empowered, reborn. That's wonderful. I feel a sense of urgency. Great, Kat. So go ahead and talk a little bit more, Kat, about what is it that you feel that urgency about. I like it, but just I want some clarification so that I'm understanding, and so the rest of the folks in our tribe here. I feel reflective, I feel inspired, I feel awake, I feel smiley, I feel hopeful, I feel calm, reflective, peaceful, loving, greatness outside of me, but equally the same greatness within me. Fantastic, Trish. I love the way you've described it. I feel open, I feel more openness. Thank you very much. Thank you for the clarity, for the tenderness. That's fantastic, folks. So go ahead and ask me any questions. Clearly, this meditation has really served you well. And, it definitely served me. And I share these meditations every single one of my meditation commentaries, and those of you who've been joining know this, they're very unique. I feel that moment. I feel what is it that has arisen, the topic and the energy, the environment, what is going on in the world today. And I try to cater to that situation. And so my meditations are always unique. And I'm so grateful that you guys are responding so well and serving you so much. Okay, let's see. Michael's saying, thank you so much. I have to leave early, but I cannot express how incredibly grateful for what time tomorrow. So Michael, I don't do this every day. I do this once a week. And I'm considering, now that you asked this question, I'm considering extending this to besides just once a week on Wednesday night here at this time, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, etc. I'm planning to do this one more time on a weekend. I want to do a weekend morning California time, so that it'll be able to, my friends in all of the Russia and all of Europe and England. I know that many of you in Africa are missing out because, you're all fast asleep in the middle of the night for you right now. So I'm considering doing that, but I have to go ahead and actually determine a time and a date for that and what frequency. Maybe I'll do a shorter version, maybe 30 minutes. It won't be this long, just the meditation part. So you could come back for this weekly Wednesday night conversation. So that's, Michael, that's my thought on that. So go ahead, rest up, you do what you need to do. Thank you for joining me. So Anam is saying, if for someone, it is the purpose of life drives meaning in life, what if that person is not able to perform onto its purpose and then feeling as if meaning is lost? So that's a great question. So for those of you who don't, fully understand even the two terms that are brought up in this question here. So there's the two words are meaning and purpose, right? So the way I like to look at it is that purpose is what is that you do. So, if you heard the poetry at the beginning of this talk, so we talked about we're all ships that come into this world laden with certain gifts, laden with certain cargo, as the title of the poem was. And it's our job to make sure that we're disseminating, we're offloading, we're sharing, we're generously giving out these gifts, this cargo that we've come with. And as you begin to give out this cargo, you begin to find the meaning, in which case, in that particular case, you find the path where next to go, you'll be guided, right? So purpose is what you give, meaning is what you get back. And so the question is that what if you're not able to actually give out this thing? You're not able to do, and what if you were able to do at a certain point in time, and now because of whatever conditions, whether it's physical conditions, emotional, mental, or health conditions, you are finding yourself not able to give, if not give at all, give as much as what you were used to giving. And there's always a way, folks. Where there's a will, there is a way. And remember one thing, that as meaning may be similar through the course of your life, as my meditation was telling, purpose could change. The way in which you contribute your gifts, the way in which you disseminate them could change. And there's a saying that thoughts, words, actions, mansa vacha karmana, this beautiful saying in Sanskrit, which means that if it's not through physical words, it could be through action. If it's not through action, it could be through thoughts. It could be through a prayer. It could be through a blessing. It could be through silent contemplation that you're sending out a vibration through your mind. And if it is coming from that spirit, you're living to your purpose. You're doing what is your purpose right now within your capacity. And that will give you meaning. Okay, great question. So let's see. Kat is asking, the realization that my time on this earth is quite finite. Okay, so that's in response to the urgency. Thank you, Kat, for explaining. The realization that my time on this earth is quite finite. I need to make every minute count for meaning. Goals shift here. Fantastic. Awesome realization. Knowing that it's so precious. And I mean, again, not to be caught up in this sense of wanting to be productive and measuring your purpose and making this the new source of your stress, folks. Please do not misunderstand that, as you begin to contribute, that it needs to be something that we need to measure up ourselves against some sort of a benchmark, against comparing ourselves with some other person out there. Especially now we look at all of these folks who go out and produce all of this amazing content on social media, and they live this, more than life, extraordinary, these oversized, living lives. You don't have to compare yourself with them. In your way, in the own silence of your own quiet, contemplative mind, in your own heart, in that quiet space, what is the yearning for you to do? How much do you want to be able to give of yourself, right? As I told you a little while ago, it's important to always balance the giving with the receiving, because that's one of the things of life, right? Just like all things, karmic cycles, you have to learn to stop when it's time for you to start receiving, rejuvenating yourself, and thereby you can give. So yes, it's good to realize that time is precious, but not to overdo it to a point where you get drained and you find yourself being hurt in the process and finding yourself not able to keep up with your intention to give. Okay, Sherry's asking, usually I find my work gratifying, but lately, even though I know my purpose, it's been feeling less meaningful. What do you think that, why do you think that is? It's probably an evolution in your purpose. It has come to a point where that way, through that lens, in that particular style, in that particular context, you have been serving. And maybe it's time for you to reinvent yourself, see some newness. You know, the human brain is always looking for some ways of reinventing. That newness is such an important factor. So ask yourself that with those gifts, with that experience, with everything that you've done for so long, you've become an expert in that. How can you possibly find a slightly different, more enthusiastic way in which you can contribute? And this is a question, you know what? Your mother, your best friend, if you had a twin brother or sister, cannot answer this for you. It is something that has to come from the silence of your own quiet mind. It's a light that will have to come from, it has to be seen, that has to sparkle from inside. And the only way you're going to know that, what that sparkle is, what that direction is, what that next sport is sitting with yourself. Okay? So go ahead and sit with yourself. And I'm very curious. I want you to please report back to me. I want you to share with the circle, what is it that has come up for you? Because I want to see, how this is working for you. And, we can talk about it some more as we go through. If you're still feeling stuck, we can take it up one-on-one. So Loretta says, thank you. You've helped me to ground and reconnect to the essence of my spirit as I recover from a run of night shifts in ED. I was assuming that means emergency medicine, ED. I guess it's something to do with that. I know every country has a different version of that thing. So my surrogate grandfather is being buried tomorrow. He was very lovable. I don't know if that's his name, Larkin, and a role model to my sons. That's fantastic. Many blessings for you to be able to be a strength of support for those people as you go through this ceremony tomorrow. Remember, as you collect yourself, as you find your center, it is so important, especially in these kind of moments of grieving, that when you go out there, you become a pillar of support for your other family and loved ones who do not necessarily have the grounding practice, who do not have the soul tribe that you're able to enjoy the benefit from tonight before you go out to be in that ceremony tomorrow. So I ask that you please find your center, find your strength, talk about what is it that your grandfather would love to be remembered for, right? So talk about the things that he enjoyed. Talk about the bright side of these things, in which way that you can take away that solemn, that very somber energy that it's a downer, right? So find ways in which you can celebrate. Think about things that made him smile. So emphasize those things. That way you'll become that spark, that candle upon which all the moths will rally, and they can find their sense of strength and their sense of looking forward, and how they can keep the legacy alive of your great grandfather. Fantastic. I'm so glad this is so timely for some of you. So Stacy says, I feel grounded and healing from the meditation with the peace of life and relationship. With the pace of life and relationship, I often find I don't have enough meditation time to keep up. Stacy, just like anything else, it's a regiment. It's something that you need to kind of, initially at least, start putting that, baking that into your schedule. Just like you take 3 meals a day. I don't know, assuming you take 3 meals a day, finding time to just slot this into your calendar. First thing when I wake up, that's what I do. I meditate maybe sometime like just after you get back from work. If your work is that, the regular 9 to 5 or some variation of that, then maybe just after you finish up, before you get too tired at the end of the day, maybe have another punctuation in your schedule and find a time to, even if it's like a 10-minute meditation. This is beautiful. My first day, first thing in the morning, 1 hour for me. There's no uh, making excuses. There's no negotiation there. The first hour for me is always my time. It's my quiet time, my contemplation. It's my meditation. Sometimes I sit in, just by myself, reflecting on my own thoughts. Or sometimes I just, tune into somebody else's. I have my collection of favorite meditations. Or sometimes I actually go on Insight Timer and I find something that, what am I feeling being in the mood for today? Do I want to be guided in forgiveness? Or do I want to be guided in compassion meditation, or opening the heart, or waking up, or whatever that case may be? And it's interesting. I've got about 75 of my own meditations, but I always find it interesting because, one of the beauties of Insight Timer, I must actually give it credit for where it's due, is, there's no one size fits all. And I'll take it one step further. It's not just one size fitting all, but no one day fits all. So every single day we're at a different frequency. Do you guys realize that? Sometimes I'm in the mood for something. Sometimes I require a certain pace of being spoken to. And other times it needs to be something else. Sometimes it's just music. Sometimes it's about the spaciousness between these things. Sometimes, some people talk too much. And some days it's great. I love that. But other times it's something else. So I love that how this platform has become a compilation of so many varieties of schools of thoughts and varieties of intentions and demeanors in which, so the pace at which these things are disseminated is also fantastic. So I actually enjoy, delving into different practices on any given day. So that is my practice. That's how I begin and end my day. But you can take it however you like. Thank you. A reminder for purpose. Okay, so I think we're kind of coming to the end of time. I'm just going to take this last question from Diana, and then we're going to call it a night or call it a day, whatever the time may be for you. I gave a lot but received not much back, and it is draining to keep doing that and want to give less. Any advice? Diana, so this is something which I've mentioned at the beginning of the meditation. The one who realizes that as you're sowing today, you may never sit under the tree, the shade of the tree, for the seed that you've just sown, right? So when you come to that realization, I said that is one of the greatest freedoms. So for you to expect that reward is going to come from that person or that group of people that you are investing in, that you're giving to, is in a way the source of distress. I tell you, when you give from the place of, this is my purpose, this is why I'm here, this is what my heart wants to do, the joy comes in the act of giving itself. The reward is right there baked in without the need for acknowledgement, appreciation, or reward that comes back from the other person. Okay? Now, when you give the control of the reward to that person or people that you're serving, in this case, you're actually giving them the remote for your sense of happiness, because they know, even with the best of intentions, when you give your power to somebody else, they have suddenly gained the access to control your happiness, your sense of well-being, your sense of self-worth. And that is something you do not want to be doing. You want to be doing everything you can to stay within your power, to stay within your self-respect, to stay within your strength. And then coming from a place of giving for the sake of giving itself. So ask yourself, if I have been giving without any desire to be appreciated, acknowledged, or rewarded, then where is the sense of dissatisfaction coming from? Maybe it is an environment that is just not healthy for you. Maybe it's time for you to relook at what is it that you would call your container. Maybe it's a time for you to move. I don't know, but it's a reflection that you need to have for yourself, and you will be your best judge. You will be the one that will be able to know what is really the source of your discomfort, your disillusionment in the state of your giving and not receiving back. With that, folks, I want to thank you all once again. We went a little bit over time, but again, great questions, great conversation. I love it. It's my soul tribe, as I've already said this. Thank you once again for all of you who've made your donations. Like I said, you're supporting a whole slew of folks that support me in being able to put out all this amazing content. It's a collaboration that's global. So with that said, peace. Thank you very much. Until I see you all again, same place, same time next week. Be well and stay strong.